Okay, ready? Good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Sergeant Toy Vixvong. I'm the Public Information Officer for the St. Paul Police Department. This morning, you will be hearing from Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley, followed by St. Paul Police Department Chief Axel Henry, and then Hennepin County Sheriff DaWanna Witt. There will be time for questions because there's local and national news media here. Please state your name and the news media outlet you're with. With that, Chief Mark Bruley.
They're not getting the mics.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Bruley, Police Chief of the City of Brooklyn Park. Behind me is a bunch of amazing police chiefs that are here in support of a very short but very important message that we want to share with you. What you won't hear from any of us today is rhetoric of abolish immigration enforcement. The truth is, immigration enforcement is necessary for our national security and for local security. But how it's done is extremely important. In fact, we have a long history of working exceptionally well with our federal partners, including ICE agents, and we have seen the best of them perform their job extremely well in the past. With that said, recently, as the last 2 weeks, we, as law enforcement community, have been receiving endless complaints about civil rights violations in our streets from U.S. citizens. What we're hearing is they're being stopped in traffic stops or on the street with no cause and being forced to demand paperwork to determine if they are here legally. As this went on over the past 2 weeks, we started hearing from our police officers the same complaints as they fell victim to this while off duty. Every one of these individuals is a person of color who has had this happen to them. In Brooklyn Park, one particular officer that shared her story with me was stopped as she passed ICE going down the roadway. When they boxed her in, they demanded her paperwork, of which she's a U.S. citizen and clearly would not have any paperwork. When she became concerned about the rhetoric and the way she was being treated, she pulled out her phone. In an attempt to record the incident, the phone was knocked out of her hands, preventing her from recording it. The officer had their guns drawn during this interaction, and after the officer became so concerned, they were forced to identify themselves as a Brooklyn Park police officer in hopes of slowing the incident and de-escalating the incident down. The agents then immediately left after hearing this, making no other comments, no other apologies, just got in their vehicles and left. I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident. In fact, many of the chiefs standing behind me have similar incidents with their off-duty officers. This isn't just important because it happened to off-duty police officers, but what it did do is we know that our officers know what the Constitution is, they know what right and wrong is, and they know when people are being targeted, and that's what they were. If it is happening to our officers, it pains me to think of how many of our community members are falling victim to this every day. It has to stop. This behavior erodes the trust that these police chiefs have worked tirelessly for the last 5 years and theoretically the last 60 years to stop this exact behavior from happening. Now, I want to be really clear. I've called lots of other ICE agents and HSI agents and have talked to a lot of individuals about this. This is not widespread. This is a small group of agents within the surge in the metro area that are performing or acting this way. As a matter of fact, as rumors of this had spread, I've received phone calls from ICE agents and HSI agents indicating this is not how they act, this is not what they do. Regardless, we're calling to action that we have more supervision over the surge, that this type of civil rights violations have to stop. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Henry of the St. Paul Police Department.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Again, my name is Axel Henry. I'm the Police Chief for the City of St. Paul Police Department. I want to echo the sentiments that were just said. and share with you that we've had employees for our city that have experienced some of the same things. Thankfully, not with firearms drawn, but traffic stops that were clearly outside the bounds of what federal agents are allowed to do. We recognize by standing here today that some might say, you're only speaking up because this is happening to the cops. Others will say that we're speaking out against ICE, and that means we want rapists on the street. Neither of those things are true. We want to find some common ground. Law enforcement has more authority than a general citizen. That means we have more responsibility in how we behave. We have to find common ground here, and we have to figure out a way that these processes, which are clearly failing if American citizens are being grabbed or stopped or seized, this can't happen. We have to make sure that everyone's civil rights are intact. I truly want to believe that there isn't anybody on either side of the political aisle that thinks that people's civil rights aren't important. They have to be the cornerstone of everything we do. Yesterday, our country honored Dr. Martin Luther King, and I was struck by the fact, and I'm paraphrasing, but he once said, "We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools." We can't be foolish. We can't be those fools. So we are asking that we come together and figure out a way for this state and this country to resolve these things before things get any worse. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. DaWanna Witt, Sheriff of Hennepin County. Just yesterday, our nation honored the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Challenged us to at least remember the history, not only to remember history, but also live in its lessons. The theme of this year's MLK breakfast, make a career of humanity. And that is what myself and others are trying to do. We're trying to make sure that humanity remains in the noble profession of policing. As I know what it feels like to be stereotyped, judged, and profiled, I know firsthand what it means to be seen before being understood. Our nation, and particularly our agencies and state, have worked hard to confront the wrongs of the past. The work that has never been perfect and is still a progress in the making. We know that we have a lot more to do, but there has been real progress, and it's very important that we do not lose sight of that. But today, unfortunately, we are seeing that progress erode. I am seeing and hearing about people in Hennepin County stopped, questioned, and harassed solely because of the color of their skin, solely being the operative word here. This is not okay now, and it's never been okay. And now, that same discrimination is also spilling into the law enforcement community. Dr. King reminded us that the time is always right to do the right thing. And for those of you in position of leadership, now is not the time to be quiet. When we have concrete examples of profiling, we need to do the right thing. We cannot let people in our communities think that our local law enforcement leadership is okay with the actions that we simply know are not just only wrong, but illegal. We can't just say this is a noble profession and not treat it as such. So what does it mean to be noble? It means someone admired for high moral character, showing qualities like honesty, courage, generosity, honor, and often acting in unselflessness and integrity. Integrity, one of the pillars of this profession. 5 years ago, our city, specifically Minneapolis and Hennepin County, became ground zero for civil unrest. Since that time, local law enforcement has been doing the hard, necessary work to rebuild trust within our communities. Rebuilding a community and an environment where people should feel safe. Rebuilding our law enforcement agencies with the people who honor the humanity that we want in our communities. You see, trust isn't just an abstract idea. Trust means victims of violence feel safe, calling 911. Trust means witnesses coming forward, crimes getting reported. Trust means that communities welcome law enforcement as partners in their community. You see, we just don't want to be a part of our community. We want to be partnered with our communities. And what's going on now is stifling that progress. And on a very basic level, trust means parents are not afraid to let their children go to school or church. Business owners are able to open and thrive off of their hard work of being business owners. The trust is fragile right now, and it is essential. It is an essential element to public safety. Today, that trust is being damaged, broken, by the questionable and sometimes unethical actions of some federal agents, particularly in these last recent weeks. I want to be clear that I am not saying all federal agents, as all of us know that we have become victim. If somebody or one person in law enforcement does something wrong, we all pay the cost. We cannot afford to be stereotyping or generalizing anyone. Our communities have less trust in all law enforcement when this happens, not just the federal agents, but our local law enforcement, and we're here to stay. Those harmful actions causes a ripple effect through all of our professions and through all of our agencies. What I want to assure you is we are here because we all believe that our jobs are to be done professionally, lawfully, and obviously treating people with dignity and respect. Not just marginalized communities, but every single person who calls Minnesota home. This moment is the time to do what's right. We demand more from our federal government, more professionalism, more accountability, more humanity. We demand lawful policing that respects human dignity. We should not be at a point in this profession or any profession where you have to teach people how to treat people. This is the same demand we have for our own public safety professionals who serve, live, raise their own children in our communities every day. I can tell you at the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, our deputies will continue to serve and always have, professionally, lawfully, and with the respect of every person's humanity, as I'm sure all of these agencies that are represented here today are also doing. And with that, we will all continue to show up, even though times are hard, even though our law enforcement is exhausted, they're being challenged, they're having to go home and face their own families and answer these questions. We are lucky to have men and women in this profession that continue to show up despite the adversity. So we want to thank you for having us here today, and at this time we'll take questions. And yes, sorry.
Can you talk about kind of the emotional distance there may be between wanting to put criminals away and seeing the constitutional violation and the racial profiling that is part of this mass operation here with that as the same point?
Good morning. My name is Imran Ali. I am R-A-N-A-L-I. I'm an attorney here in Minnesota. Work a lot with law enforcement from corner to corner. I think it is. I mean, that is exactly what it is. That's a very difficult issue that's before us. But the reality still remains is that the Constitution applies to everyone, and we have, and I think it's echoed, with the speakers that we've had today. We have federal ICE officers that are in their line of duty, right? They have to do what they do, right? I mean, they're ordered to do so, and they're carrying out those lawful efforts. And what we see, though, is we see people that are obstructing in that. As a lawyer, that's still a violation of the law. What we can do is we can talk about the tactics and the emotion that's there, and there's a place for that, and that place is to be discussed a lot, and also in the courtroom. And so, to give pause that what's happening here, there are mechanisms in place. There are lawsuits that we all know about. We've seen them almost every day. Something's going out. Those will play out in the court. But what can't happen, what cannot happen, is video after video of our local law enforcement officers being yelled at and threatened to by the public when they're simply there to work on behalf of the community. And I've heard from dozens and dozens of officers, and I've seen those videos. That can't happen. And that's what is increasing this temperature. It's the rhetoric and what we're seeing.
Yeah, the question was about contacting authorities in Homeland Security or ICE, Border Patrol, and what was, and is there going to be any accountability from them conversations? Great question, complex answer. I've reached out to anybody that's willing to hear. One of the real concerning problems that I have with this surge in the metro is the span of control, in that there are so many different groups that do not know what other groups are doing or who is out at any location. And so when you call ICE leadership, or you call Border Patrol leadership, or you call Homeland Security leadership, they're unable to tell you what their people were doing that day. They're hard to find a leader to give you to. They like to give you a website to go file a complaint, but the complaint requires identity of the agents. The agents don't have name tags on. They cover their face. They don't have body cameras. And the groups that seem heavily through Border Patrol that are running up and down streets, there's no indication where they are any given day. So what I get is lots of questions that I'm unable to answer about who did what or where they did it. What I will tell you is I have contacts through 30 years of law enforcement with many different agents in ICE, HSI, and others. And those individuals who I've spoken to make several things clear to me. This is not right. They see it occurring and absolutely believe it needs to stop immediately. And they want to make it quick that it's not their groups. They're aware that there are groups that seem to be have less supervision, that they believe are involved in this, but the vast majority of these groups are doing focused, legitimate immigration work that they're tasked to do, and it's well within the bounds of being legal. So.
Alex got relevant information. To that point, you allege that there seems to be a small contingency of federal agents that are operating under this racial profiling strategy. What evidence or proof do you have that this is not something that's coming from the top down, from the highest ranks of our government?
The evidence I have, the question is what evidence do I have that this is not coming from orders from the top, from Washington, D.C. to act this way? One, I just fundamentally don't believe that. Our federal government and partners that we've worked with, that I've worked with for 30 years, have an exemplary record of performing exceptional law enforcement services. When we had the horrific events this summer and partnered with some of the finest men and women that I've ever had the benefit to be around to help us investigate a very complex political assassination. I've seen the best of what the federal government has. This is not it with a small group. With that said, is what we see every day, the context that we have are agents that are working really hard in a really tough situation to do it right. I just fundamentally don't believe that it's coming from the top. In fact, I believe that I don't think the leaders in Washington, D.C. fully understand what some of their groups are doing here on the street and how much damage that they're causing, and that's why we are here to kind of bring this to light. What evidence is the question that you asked? What actual evidence do I have? None other than agents that I've talked to and leadership in certain groups of teams have made it clear that this is unacceptable behavior, that they've never been told this is okay. In fact, that they know it's not okay. They're held accountable to a higher standard, which makes me believe that what I fundamentally believe that this is a small group of individuals performing this. And I will be honest, this really, to me, started 2 weeks ago, which feels like was the last surge of Border Patrol when they arrived, is when we started seeing this really change of behavior where it's street level jump outs or traffic stops, which the federal government is not allowed to do traffic stops and tell people that they're stopping them for speeding, which is what we're seeing. That's not allowed. They are not able to do that. They need to have reasonable suspicion that somebody is here illegally for them to stop them, whether on the street or the other stop them in a vehicle. So.
What is a small group? Are you talking about dozens of agents, a handful of agents?
The question is, what is a small group? I absolutely have no idea. This is far outside of my purview as a local police chief. But what I do know is it's really impacting my community, what my community does and how they feel, and it's impacting our brand as police officers, our brand of how hard we work to build trust, to police in a way that builds legitimacy in what we do. And when people armed with rifles that have just police across their vest get out and act a certain way, of course our public thinks that's us. Many agencies that you've probably seen, and many of them are behind me, have had to put out pamphlets showing what a Brooklyn Park police officer looks like and what an ICE agent looks like, to make sure that we tell community they are different. Those are not Brooklyn Park officers or St. Paul officers or Brooklyn Center officers. Those are ICE agents. To answer your question specifically, I have no idea what groups or who it is or how many, but I know it is a small portion of the whole.
Chief Bruley, one more follow-up. What message do you think it sends to the public in view of police chief who've had decades of law enforcement experience? What message does it send to the public when you are having a hard time getting answers from the Department of Homeland Security?
Yeah, the question is, what message does it send to the community if I, as a police chief, have a hard time getting answers? How does that leave the community for them to get answers? I think it makes them feel lost. It makes them feel concerned. It makes them feel fearful. And that's why we're here today.
I'm wondering, is there anything that your agencies are you investigating these complaints that U.S. citizens or anybody else is bringing up? These concerns of officers, are you investigating them? Do you have the jurisdiction to investigate these complaints?
The question is about jurisdiction, and when we get those complaints, what do we do with those? Again, really difficult because we have, the federal government, and we also have on the state side of it as well. Obviously, I know that any law enforcement department in Minnesota is going to take any complaint that they get, but what sort of teeth do they have? What sort of enforcement do they have under the law? That is different. Again, the big issue here is it seems if people are that rhetoric is just passing like this. Everybody's passing and then they're saying things and they're not getting it in their head. It's clear that those avenues that can be utilized for the United States citizens that feel that something is happening, we've seen those lawsuits, and those lawsuits are appropriate, and the courtroom where those are discussed, that's appropriate as well. But as far as the mechanism for us to investigate those on a state side, it's just not there.
We'll take a couple more questions.
Derek James, WCCO and CBS News Minnesota. It seems to me there's a patchwork of federal agents from different agencies all on the ground. Have there been any notices of inconsistencies based on different training, different tactics used between those agencies?
We know that we talked with leadership within our federal authorities, and there has been question about the amount of training. Is the training consistent with what they were getting, say, 6 years ago? Are they going through Flexi? And then what is the vetting process like? Those have been conversations, again, at some of the highest levels that we've had. Again, they don't share that stuff with us, but I get the sense that there are some mutual feelings and that the training, some of them are not well trained. And again, I want to be careful because we do know that there's some that has impeccable training and are good at their jobs. But we are seeing an influx here, to the question earlier, what's a small number? Minnesota, we're seeing this in different areas. It's not just the metro area. We're hearing about it in other areas. It's the impact. This is one of those things where you don't worry about the numbers. We need to talk about the impact on what that 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth incident is causing to all Minnesotans.
I mentioned that you've been, unable to really talk to people in leadership about what's going on here. If we were able to get somebody on the phone to discuss, what you're seeing on the streets, what's your message?
Well, we have spoken to some leadership both locally with their supervisors. But also there's been a series, and just as recently as this morning, and I think there's actually another one scheduled for this afternoon, where higher up elected officials are meeting with law enforcement leaders from all over the state. As you can imagine, some jurisdictions are a lot smaller than others, but we're pulling that together to get that combined message. What we're trying to get out there is that this isn't just a one-off. This isn't something that's being experienced in the way that maybe it's being described all the time on the news. That these are very specific complaints that are happening literally everywhere in our state. And so we're trying to gather that as a combined voice, and we're really trying to make it clear. We understand that there is a feeling right now that if you stand up and say something, there might be a retaliation against you. None of us want that. None of us are suggesting that there isn't a legitimate lawful authority to operate here as federal agents. But we are trying to come together to say, can we please find a pathway forward? Can we find a way to make sure that we can do these things without scaring the hell out of our community members and freaking everyone out? People are afraid right now, and I get it. We watch the news and we see very, very angry groups of people out protesting. But the people that we're dealing with as police chiefs are the people that are scared to death, that are afraid to go outside, not because their status is in question, but because they're hearing and they're seeing that they know people that are getting stopped by the way that they looked, and they don't want to take that risk.
Thank you. Thank you all.